Science Beetle.
Hey, welcome back, students. This is Dr. D for ScienceBeetle.com, and today we're going to be covering the coordinated plane. And so when we talk about the coordinated plane, what we're talking about are essentially two dimensions, really, the x and the y dimensions. Okay, but x, as you know, is going to be the x-axis, and the y is going to be on the y-axis. And these two axes are going to come into play when we put them together. And we know that the x-axis essentially is going to be a horizontal line. And we know that the y-axis is going to be a vertical line. The way we would represent these would be on a sheet of paper would be the x-axis going this way, and we'll call this the x-axis, and the y-axis perpendicular to this line, moving in the vertical direction, and this is the y-axis. And along the axis, on either the x or the y-axis, you'll usually find certain increments, and these increments are going to be little distances that you can go on the axis, on the x or the y-axis, and essentially where these 2 points meet, right here in the middle, and let me change colors for us. Right here in the middle, this section right here is what we call the 0 point, because that marks the 0 point for both the x-axis and the y-axis. And it is from here that you are going to have an increase. And so the hash marks represent distances from the 0 point on the left direction and on the right direction. So the ones I drew here are going to be the ones on the right, but you can also go equally on the other side, on the left side, and have them there as well. Now, there's a difference here in terms of what the number really means, or the distances for the x and on the left side versus the right side, and the same thing for the distances for the hash marks going up and down on the y-axis. Okay, so this is one way that people will draw it. Let me show you a way that you might be able to see it on a book or see it on a sheet of paper that some of your teachers may give you. So here's a coordinated plane that I've gotten for you. And again, let's just mark them here. This is going to be the x-axis all the way across, so it goes this way. And you're also going to have the y-axis over here that goes up and down. Now, remember the hash marks that we identified. So here we've got the plane's already divided up into various sections. So you can see that here's 1 unit, 2, 3, so on and so forth. And let's go ahead and draw the 0 point. So from here, we can determine. Now, if we were to write our numbers, we would know that our numbers begin at 0, and they make their way to, they increase in size as you move to the right. And so, if we look at this mark here would be the mark for 1, 2, 3, and let's go ahead and write those down there just so you can see them. And we can go down the line, and 4, so on and so forth. But as soon as you come over here to the 0 spot, let me just write that down like this. As you move numbers there from the 0 spot, since we don't have any more numbers in terms of, we don't have any more quantity, when we move to the left, numbers there then take on the role of negative. And so here we would have -1, this would be -2, this one here would be -3, here -4, and so on and so forth. So essentially what you've got is as you move to the right of 0, so in this spot, you're going to see that numbers are going to be positive. And as you move to the left, numbers on this side, the numbers are going to be negative. And that only applies when we're looking at the x-axis. So if the x-axis then were drawn up here, we would see that any number on this side then are going to be positive numbers, and any numbers drawn on the other side are going to be, on this side here, are going to be negative numbers. And again, the x-axis could be drawn down here. It doesn't matter where it's drawn. Either way, the numbers are going to be positive on the right side, and on the left side, or they're going to be negative. And that's all we're really saying. So at any point of x along this axis, you're going to have numbers that are positive on the right-hand side, numbers that are negative on the left-hand side. But does that hold true for the y-axis? Well, let's take a look. The way the y-axis works, think of it kind of like a shifting of the x-axis. So if we were to take the x-axis from here, if we were to take this and essentially shift it this way, well, you see that, well, if we do that, also keep in mind that this is a straight line, so this part here would then be shifted down. Okay. Now, obviously, the x-axis is very different from the y-axis, but just for the moment, just follow me here. If we were to do that, where do you think the positive and the negative numbers would lie? Well, if you remember from the x-axis, these numbers over here on this side are going to be negative. And the numbers over here on this side, on the right side, these numbers are going to be positive. So if that's the case, and if we do the shift, then what we're going to find is that the numbers up here on the y-axis moving up, so this numbers here, these two are also going to be positive. And if we look at the numbers here for the negatives on the x-axis, if we shift them down, we also find that on the y-axis, these numbers at the bottom here are going to be negative. So let me clean this up and show us here, just in text, where the positive and the negative numbers lie. So I'm going to denote positive with blue, and so the positive numbers are going to be here, positive, and then up here again on the side, so these numbers up here are going to be positive. And then the negative numbers I'm going to represent in red, and so negative numbers on the x-axis would be over here on the left-hand side, and negative numbers on the y, they would be down here at the bottom. And so let's go ahead and write those down. And so if you look at this very carefully, then you can start to see where certain points on a xy axis or a coordinated plane, they can give you certain numbers. Now, the thing that we haven't talked about yet is what these points are called. And so whenever you take a point, let's say that I take this point here, this point on a coordinated plane is going to have two values. And let me represent these two values over here on the side. Okay? And so the values are going to have, is what we called a pair, and it's going to consist of one x value and one y value. And so let me erase the arrow so we're not confused. And so every point on a coordinated plane is going to have an x value and a y value. Now, the x value always goes first, and the y value goes second. And they're separated by a comma. So if we're trying to figure out what the two points, or the x and y coordinates for this particular point that I've drawn, we essentially need to count the spaces on the x-axis that align with this one. So an easy way to do this would be to mark the coordinated plane with dash marks. And I'm going to go ahead and do that in purple. And so essentially what we're looking for is this line here and this line here. And what we're trying to figure out is what point is here, marked by the dot here, and what point is on the mark there. Now keep in mind, since we are in the positive section of the x-axis, all we need to do is count. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So on the x-axis, the x would be 5. Now we need to do the same thing for the y-axis and count those numbers. And so we would move in the up, moving in the up direction, in the positive direction, we would see that we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so the point that we've got here, this point then can be identified with the pair 5, 6. And notice that both numbers are going to be positive 5 and positive 6 because they are in the positive directions on the coordinated plane. And so what if we had a point down here in this area? Well, again, we would check the marks. And so since we know, let me just go ahead and rewrite our positive and negative regions. And actually, in this time, I'm not going to write the word, but all I'm going to do is just draw a red line for the section that is going to be negative. Okay? And so we know that we've got that there, and I'm going to draw a blue line for the sections that are blue. And that will kind of help us here in terms of visibility as we look at this. So when we do this, then to find the XY region for this particular point, okay, all we got to do is look at the x-axis first. And so knowing that the x-axis here starts at 0, we're going to start counting from there. So we're going to go -1, -2, -3. So the x value for this particular point is going to be -3, separated by a comma. Now we have to find the y value. And then since the value is going down from 0, it would be -1, -2, -3. So the pair for this particular point is going to be -3, -3. And so let's just do 2 more examples so you can get the hang of it. What if our pair or our point was located over here? And so let's go ahead and write the value here for x and y. So this was a -3, -3. We had a point up here before, here on the positive regions of the x and y. And let's go ahead and erase this over here. And let's just find this new point that we've got here at the bottom right corner. And so in order to do that, we're going to go and try to find it. So in order for us to find it, let me draw the line there, draw the line there. And so we've got on the x-axis, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So x for this point is going to be 5. And the y-axis moving down is going to be 1, 2, 3. So -3. So the pair here is going to be 5, -3. And again, what if we had a point over here on this side? Well, let's find that one as well. So we'll draw the little hash marks just to help us out in terms of locating the points on the x and y axis. Okay, and so if we start counting again, on the x-axis, since we're moving to the left of 0, the numbers are going to be negative. So it's -1, -2, -3, -4. So the x value is going to be -4. And the y value, it's up, so it's going to be positive. So it's going to be +1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So +5. And so that would be the pair here for this point. -4, 5. Now, if you look at this very carefully, you're going to notice something. So if we look at this first number over here on the top right-hand corner, you notice that both values are going to be positive. And the reason we know that is because if we look at the x-axis, the values are going to be positive and positive. So positive, let me change the color here. So this is positive and positive for x and y. And if we move this way, we notice that the x value is going to be negative, but the y value is positive. And if we move down, we notice here that the values for x and y are going to be negative and negative. And if we move across to the bottom right corner, the values are going to be positive for the x and negative for the y. Now this is very interesting because when you look at the coordinated plane, the main thing that you can figure out always is, you know that if we select a number, and let me clear some of this up. We know that if we select a point up in this region here, which I'm going to label as number 1 with a Roman numeral 1, you know that all of these numbers are going to have positive x's and positive y's. And then we move over here to section 2. These numbers are going to have a negative x and a positive y. Why? Because they are above, at least for the y's, they are above the 0 line. And moving down to the third section, so here's section 3, 1, 2, 3. The numbers in this section are going to be negative and negative. Again, because they are below the 0 line here for the y-axis, and they are to the left of the x-axis. So all numbers are going to be negative, negative. And in the last section here, section 4, so that's section 4, the numbers here are going to be positive for the x's, and the y's are going to be negative. And the reason the x's are positive is because we're to the right of the 0 line, and they are negative for the y because we are below the 0 line on the y, which is right here. And so if you notice here, we've got 4 sections. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and essentially when we look at a coordinated plane, when you put these together, each of these sections then become quadrants. And if you look at the word quadrant, for those of you in Spanish, this is almost the same thing as cuatro, which means 4. And there are 4 sections. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so there's a little bit of information for you about the coordinated plane. Hopefully that helps out a lot. In later sections, we'll get to use the coordinated plane a little bit more in terms of helping us find slope and graphing points. For the now, this is just a general overview. Hope that helps. Go ahead and subscribe us, and we'll see you at the next lesson.